Questions for oral answer. I call on Government Order of the Day number 1.
Climate Change Response, Emissions Trading and Other Matters Amendment Bill, first reading.
The Honourable Tim Grosser.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Climate Change Response, Emissions Trading and Other Matters Amendment Bill be now read a first time. I nominate the Finance and Expenditure Committee to consider the bill. At the appropriate time, I intend to move that the bill be reported to the House by 17 October 2012 and that the committee have the authority to meet at any time while the House is sitting, except during oral questions, during any evening on a day on which there has been a sitting of the House, and on a Friday in a week in which there has been a sitting of the House.
Order. Order. Would members leaving the chamber please show some courtesy to the member trying to address the business of the House?
Thank you,
Honourable
Mr.
Tim Grosser.
And to meet outside the Wellington region during a sitting of the House, despite Standing Orders 188, 190 and 191, 1B and C. Mr Speaker, the Climate Change Response Amendment Bill includes both major amendments to the NZ ETS that the Government intends to make in response to the recommendations of the New Zealand ETS Review Panel 2011, as well as international developments, and a number of technical and minor amendments that aim to improve the operational effectiveness of the emissions trading scheme. While the Government has chosen not to implement all of the recommendations of the review panel, I do want to acknowledge the considerable work of the panel in framing the issues in a way that's helped the Government address the issues in question. This bill will ensure that the ETS effectively supports the Government's economic growth priorities by keeping carbon costs at a level that is appropriate in the light of the current economic climate and other countries' climate change actions. The amendment will mitigate the short-term costs for businesses and households and will ensure that the ETS is flexible enough to cater for a range of future international scenarios. Let me briefly examine and outline the major changes to the bill. Existing transitional measures reducing the impact of the ETS on households and businesses will be extended beyond 2012 without an end date, subject to a review in 2015. This will facilitate New Zealand's ongoing economic recovery by ensuring that there will not be significant increases to ETS-related costs for businesses and households until at least 2015. The entry date for surrender obligations for biological emissions for agriculture will be deferred and will not be specified in primary legislation. The Government's current intention is to re-examine the entry date for surrender obligations for biological emissions from agriculture and the continuation of the transition phase in 2015. The bill introduces offsetting for pre-1990 forestry in the ETS. This will give owners of pre-1990 forest land more flexibility. This bill also introduces the power to allow auctioning within an overall cap on the supply of New Zealand units, NZUs. Auctioning will mitigate the risk that New Zealand businesses would buy too many international units and will give ETS participants more certainty about supply of units in the scheme. This bill makes a number of technical changes so the scheme is more workable and flexible. For example, it improves the current treatment of the synthetic greenhouse gases sector in the ETS. Equally, it removes deforestation liabilities where forest land cannot be re-established because a natural event prevents it. Now, some of these technical changes will also address issues arising from the interaction between the ETS, multiply owned Māori land and the Te Ture Whenua Māori Act 1993. Because of the complex nature of the ETS, a couple of technical issues have arisen subsequent to consultations, which we believe do merit further consideration in the Select Committee stage. The first relates to some very detailed offsetting rules, very complex rules around pre-1990 forestry. The second relates to the Crown's ability to manage its Kyoto obligation for the first commitment period. Further amendments to the Act may be necessary to ensure that the Act can be certain to meet its first commitment period obligation in an efficient and effective manner by setting aside emission units it requires for that obligation now. If the committee considers that these issues do need to be addressed, then they may wish to make recommendations to the bill. In conclusion, this bill, Mr. Speaker, will keep carbon costs in New Zealand at a level similar to the current level, which is appropriate in terms of the current economic climate and international progress. It will make sure that our businesses remain internationally competitive and households are not weighed down by rising costs. I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the Honourable Member Moana Maki.